Hello and welcome to World Youth Day Central. I'm Pedro Guevara Mann.
And I'm Father Chris Valca. It's day 3 of World Youth Day Madrid, and the Pope has arrived.
The Pope has arrived. It was about 6 hours ago now that he arrived, and in about 15 minutes he will be at the Papal welcome ceremony.
That's right.
This is one of the...
not quite there yet, though. We've got 15 minutes, and we've got a lot coming to you in that time.
Absolutely. We're going to go to that. But before that, we're going to do a quick recap of yesterday.
Right. We're also going to learn about one of the parts of World Youth Day that we haven't spoken a whole lot about yet, and it's always an underlying theme of World Youth Day.
Yes. And do you know who was the first saint of the Americas to be canonized? All of that and more is coming right up, so don't go anywhere.
Her feast day is celebrated on August the 23rd. Saint Rose of Lima is known for her love of the Eucharist and prayer. Born 1586, Lima, Peru. Saint Rose of Lima, pray for us.
For World Youth Day pilgrims in Madrid, there was one place to be on Wednesday, August 17th, and it was the Love and Life Center. The program began in the morning with an inspirational catechetical session led by Cardinal George Pell of Australia.
So I ask you to promise that you will do your best, that the flame of faith is not extinguished in your watch.
Following a presentation by Curtis Martin, founder of the Fellowship of Catholic University Students, the youth listened to a panel discussion on religious freedom and the media, which featured Archbishop Chaput, Father Thomas Rosica, Helen Alvarez, and Supreme Knight Carl Anderson.
Religious liberty goes to the center of what it means to be a person. It is foundational. It is at the very heart of the human person because it involves the human conscience, and therefore it is the first right.
The day culminated with Marianfest, a celebration of Mary through song, prayer, and reflection.
Juan Diego one day saw Our Lady of Guadalupe. And the message of Our Lady of Guadalupe, she said, I want a holy house. Yo quiero una casita sagrada. I want a holy house in order to give my son, my love, Jesus Christ. I want a holy house.
Mary was the first one to welcome Jesus. The first one to welcome Jesus into her home because she carried Christ in her womb. Blessed Pope John Paul II even referred to Mary as the first tabernacle in history.
Musical performances by Latin Grammy winner Alexander Acha and the world-renowned Irish singer Dana brought to a close another exciting day at the Love and Life Center.
Sing it out to the whole world. We are one Lord. On the rock of Peter, see my church I build. And we do not stand alone. Come receive my spirit with my gifts be filled. We are one body. You are my body, you're my hands and feet.
Her feast day is celebrated on August the 23rd. Saint Rose of Lima is known for her love of the Eucharist and prayer. Born 1586, Lima, Peru. Saint Rose of Lima, pray for us.
We'd like to thank David for and the Knights of Columbus for sharing that clip with us. You know, one of the things that we've talked a lot about are all the pilgrims that are here, but one of the other stories is the gathering of religious and all of the priests that come here. We are joined this evening with one such religious. So,
yes.
Sister Angela Gutsema, I'd like to thank you very much for joining us here this evening. And you're with the Apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Very good. And this is your first World Youth Day, as we understand.
Yes, it is.
Which been your impression so far?
It's awesome. I keep saying this is the best World Youth Day ever, but it's only my first one.
Yes.
Everybody is so excited, and there's pilgrims everywhere you look. Everybody's singing, chanting. it's just awesome. Everything has been great.
Sorry, I was gonna. But as a woman religious, do you? My experience in seeing so many clerical collars and so many habits is probably not the same as yours. But how do you feel about seeing so many other religious communities gathered together, so many priests, so many bishops?
I think it's great. I think it's also great for us to see each other, like from other countries.
Yeah.
We've met a lot of different religious from other countries. And then even we came together with a group from the United States, the CMSWR community. And so we have several different communities represented. And
our viewers probably don't know what the CMSWR is, so you probably need to explain that.
Sorry. It's a group of religious communities that we just come together. It's a way of supporting one another.
So it's a community, like a conference of religious communities?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, your community is based in the United States.
Our mother house is in Rome, and then we're also based in the United States in Hamden, Connecticut.
And that's where you are.
And tell us about your community. What is your community like? I mean, you're in Bridgeport. So
I'm in Bridgeport.
What do you do there? What is the work of your community? Give it. Here's your little plug. Here's your chance.
All right. Here we go.
Vocations.
Okay, we're called the Apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and apostle is somebody who's sent. So every year we're sent on mission wherever the church needs us to go, wherever our superiors need us to serve. And then we're apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. So we want to spread Sacred Heart devotion. So this World Youth Day is really meaningful to us because everybody's being consecrated to the Sacred Heart.
Right.
So it's really exciting.
So would that be your charism?
That would be our charism.
So how do you do that? How do you?
You do that in the way you live your life. I mean, it depends what your ministry also is. So if I'm a teacher, I want to bring the Sacred Heart to the children that I teach.
I see.
And that's what you do, correct?
You're
a teacher for...
I'm a teacher.
Third grade?
Third grade.
Third grade, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Now, sorry, one of the components of at least for the last couple World Youth Days, I believe since Toronto, is this idea of vocations and promoting vocations fairs. And this World Youth Day is no different. Well, it's a little different in that there isn't just one big vocations pavilion, but there are several vocation fairs, the largest one at Retiro Park. And Sheridan Echlar had a chance to visit one of these vocation fairs yesterday, and this is what she found.
I'm here at St. Francis Borgia Church in downtown Madrid, and it's the first ever vocations fair being held by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. The fair, which was very well received, included keynote speaker Father Robert Barron, testimonials, ongoing Eucharistic adoration, and plenty of opportunities to mingle with the bishops. The evening ended with benediction and prayer.
Most of us bishops can testify to the number of vocations that we've seen through young men and also young women to the religious life, young men to the priesthood, after having attended World Youth Day. I think it gets them really discerning. First of all, it draws them closer to Christ and to prayer, and that's fundamental. And World Youth Day, having that experience of learning that maybe God might be calling me. They see a lot of priests, they see a lot of sisters, they see a lot of seminarians, and we try to plant that seed because many young people perhaps never really thought about whether God might be calling them. So I think World Youth Day does that.
The church in general, we need holy vocations, whether it be religious or priests. We certainly need holy marriages, holy families, and I think they all come together and make up the fullness of the church, you know, having our natural parents, you know, as well as our spiritual mothers and fathers. And it's so important to have them all come together and really, you know, guide all the faithful into living the faith to the full and really entering into that relationship with the Lord.
When friends ask how I'm doing, I say I am having the time of my life and that I wouldn't exchange it for anything else. And as I get closer and closer to the priesthood, I realize a sense of unworthiness, you know, and you start to realize that the priesthood is a pure and undeserved gift that God generously gives to those who are called to participate in his priesthood. So that's been one of the biggest challenges, but the more I realize on how unworthy I am, the more I realize how much of a gift the priesthood is to serving God's people, no matter their age, no matter their situation in life. One adult who I grew up with, who's now in his 80s, he said, you know, one day I'll call you Father. And you realize that the priesthood, it's not what you do, it's who you are. And realizing that gift is a wonderful thing.
No doubt that World Youth Day has inspired countless vocations, and hopefully this year there will be even more.
Did you know St. Rose of Lima was not a nun? Rather, she was a lay tertiary, spending most of her life at her family home where she worked to support the family. She was such a beautiful baby that she was called Rose, and that name remained. As she grew older, she became more and more beautiful, but she was so devoted to her vow of chastity that she used pepper and lye to ruin her complexion, so she would not be attractive. St. Rose was a mystic and visionary who received many mental and physical sufferings, including invisible stigmata. St. Rose of Lima, pray for us.
Thanks, Sheridan. You know, we've been talking about the unique contribution and experience of church that World Youth Day is. And I think for a lot of young people, they come here and it's a chance where they get to see the joy of a vocation in the church. And I think we certainly saw that in the clips that we just saw from Sheridan.
Yeah. I love hearing the seminarian and his joy at how he's enjoying it, and the fact that what he said about, one day I'm going to call you Father.
Right,
and,
right.
You must have had.
And certainly when I was in Sydney, I was actually one of the people responsible for the Vocations Fair, and there the Vocations Fair was centered in one spot, and we saw 2,500 young people come through every hour. And it was an enormous amount of people that were coming through, and certainly at this World Youth Day, there are several different venues. Retiro Park is the largest one. It holds about 65 different ecclesial type communities and groups and religious communities and whatnot. And I think, Sister, certainly one of the things that you have to appreciate here for yourself is this is probably the largest gathering of women religious and seminarians and priests that you've probably ever seen.
You're right.
And I think for a lot of the kids, it's inspiring, because here you have a chance. I mean, most of the time, if you think what you see back home, I mean, the chances for students or young people to see, you know, multiple priests gathered together, laughing with each other, the fraternal sense that exists between not just the women's communities and the men's communities, but men and women religious communities. I mean, I have a chance to be able to see some of my the friends of mine that are sisters that I don't get to see very often.
And there's something about this whole World Youth Day experience, and I don't know if it's just this meeting with the church. I think it is, because I know you had an experience with the Pope. It wasn't a World Youth Day, and I want to ask you about that. But there's something about it that really is conducive to helping people, not just young people, but everybody, kind of be open to a religious calling.
Right.
What was your experience you had?
Well, mine was with John Paul II. He came to St. Louis. And at that time, I had been dating somebody, and we had gone to see John Paul II. And when he came into that arena, I was just really struck, because here was this man who was an amazing actor. He was very intelligent.
Yes.
He was into sports. He was into hockey. And God called him, and he said yes to be a priest. He never even knew what God was going to do with him when he said yes. And I remember just watching him and thinking, wow, that is really amazing that he did that. And then when he came in, he was, at that point he was elderly, and he was hunched over.
Right.
And everybody was screaming and cheering, and it felt like my world stopped.
Yeah.
And then he said, if anybody here feels called to religious life, I urge them to respond immediately. And I said, okay. But
That's amazing.
I said, if he says yes, then I can say yes. Yeah.
And were you practicing Catholic? I mean, have you been going to church?
Not really. Like my family, we went to Mass sometimes. I was active in youth group, but I really was not practicing my faith that much. And it obviously changed my life.
I want to ask you about that a little bit, but I'm just getting word that the Holy Father is actually en route, and we have a feed now. So just don't go anywhere, because we're going to go right to the Holy Father arriving at the Papal Welcome Ceremony.
Imitate St. Rose of Lima. Do not seek the path of worldly greatness. Try to live each day as faithfully to your vocation as possible. St. Rose of Lima, pray for us.
The Holy Father, he's staying at the Nunciature, the Apostolic Nunciature, which is where the Holy Father would normally stay when he visits any country, and he's driving on his way to Independence Square, La Plaza de la Independencia, where the Papal Welcome Ceremony is going to begin. And this experience that young people are having right now, or people, Spanish people, of being close to the Holy Father, I think, sister, is probably a little bit of what you were experiencing in St. Louis.
It's exactly it.
So
I mean, the presence of somebody like that who gives their life to Christ, you can't help but want to do the same thing. And I think often in the media we hear so many negative things about the youth, and then when you have the leader of the Catholic Church saying that you're called to nothing less than mere like moral and spiritual greatness, that you want to respond. You don't want to settle.
So you felt? Did you feel encouraged or challenged?
Both encouraged and challenged.
It's interesting because in the papal arrival earlier today, that message came through from both the king and from the Pope himself. Both of them talked about how they wanted to be able to encourage the youth to follow their ambitions, and they wanted to empower the youth. And so I think we see that theme. You know, the king also recognized that this is a country that, you know, where a lot of the youth are disenfranchised, they're frustrated. Things are not these are not the easiest times for them.
No.
And so he had said that the Holy Father is the presence of the Holy Father is one of hope, and that I think we certainly see that.
And even that young people need to be challenged.
Right.
That there's something.
I think they want to be challenged.
Yeah, they do. They do. I mean, maybe that's how you felt.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what
you want
was missing for you. So, my understanding is that this is Serrano Street, and the Holy Father is making his way at a pretty good clip.
I think it's important to note, though, and we saw this even behind the studio set here, that we saw not only pilgrims, but a lot of people who were clearly not pilgrims of all ages. People were going out to the streets, and they were going to welcome the Holy Father, and they just wanted to catch a glimpse or see what they could see.
And not just local people, but I think that a lot of people have come, families even that are not pilgrims, but they come from other countries to see the Holy Father. And that's kind of interesting about World Youth Day, that yes, it's a gathering for young people, but it's also a papal visit.
Right.
And you can't really separate both. Now, once the Holy Father, it's a little bit of a dynamic ceremony that we're going to have, not unlike the ones in Cologne.
Previous World, all the World Youth Day gatherings,
but certainly the last two, because they involved boats and
cars and all kinds of different stops. There's multiple stages, and to this ceremony there are multiple stages, just like years past.
Yes, there won't be any boats, but certainly 2 locations, and the Holy Father will arrive at. You'll see these people might recognize the Plaza de la Independencia, Independence Square, centrally located in Madrid. It has this monument with 5 doorways or gates. And that's where the ceremony is going to begin. And then there will be a little bit more of a drive-through in the Pope Mobile. And then the ceremony will, the actual liturgical part of the ceremony will be at the same site at Cibeles Square, where the opening Mass took place on Tuesday night.
Interesting at that Mass when the bishop said, "This is the generation of Pope Benedict XVI."
And he made a point to say that it was not the same generation of John Paul II. And I think people I don't know how the two of you feel, but I forget that. Because we're very much John Paul II.
Well, and even during the arrival, I mean, the pilgrims that were there were 2,000 pilgrims that were present at the arrival, and they were saying at the airport, this is the World Youth Day of Pope Benedict. They were really dedicating it to him.
That's right, and the chant. We are the youth of I can't remember how the chant goes, but we're the youth of the Pope.
Anywhere you go, though, you hear them chanting. The pilgrims are always chanting.
Yes.
Benedicto, and
in clapping.
Subways everywhere.
Yes, it's. I must say, we mentioned earlier that the energy had changed a little bit.
Right. And it has.
And again, I don't know what it is exactly, other than the Holy Father has arrived, but there is a different energy.
Sister, tell us a little bit about some of your, as you've been in your first World Youth Day, some of the things that you've attended or seen, or what has really left an impression with you. Obviously, it's been a great experience. What are some of the things that have struck you as you've been walking around, or conversations you've been hearing, things you might have learned or picked up? Or
I think one of the things, yesterday we went to the Prado, and I just kept thinking about how these people had this gift of art, and they had something really deep that they were holding on to that they wanted to express. So when you saw the crucifixion and the Annunciation, this was an expression of somebody's prayer, somebody's relationship with Christ, and now you see all these young people, and they are just as excited about their relationship with Christ. And I keep thinking, I wonder what God is going to do. What kind of art, what kind of things are these young people going to produce?
Right.
Yesterday or today, on the way here, I saw a group of students, and I said, I told them that I was going to be on here. I said, what would you want me to say? And they said, tell them we love the Pope. We love him. And it was just exciting to see all these people that are so diverse yet so united in faith. It's really cool.
Right.
And I mean, I can understand how someone would not be able to understand that. How can you love a man who you don't know personally?
Right. Read him.
Well, but even in really reading him, although he's very good when you read him, I think you get to know him a little more intimately. But still, how can we say that we love a man who we haven't met personally, but
we
it's
love
because
the tradition.
Of,
we love the tradition.
Absolutely, and what he stands for, and his teaching authority, and the seat of Peter, and there's this whole.
You know, I was in a media panel earlier today, and the question that was asked to us, I'm wondering, Sister, what your response would be, or even Pedro, what yours would be. But they asked us, they said, how has Pope Benedict influenced your ministry? And I said, you know, I'm a teacher, and I really have appreciated the teacher in this Pope, that he has really allowed for, you know, the conversations, the Q&A that he's had with seminarians, or even with the press corps, that he's really allowed for questions to be asked, and he really has tried to be a teacher for the church, in a way that I don't quite see that Pope John Paul II was. I think that you've really seen more of the teacher in Pope Benedict, and so for myself as a teacher, that is one way he has really influenced my own ministry. And that was reiterated, and actually there were about 5 of us on this panel, and that was reiterated by all of us, that we appreciated that he was like a professor to us. It was, you know, you could read him and you could be present, read him, and you could listen to you know, all the various avenues we have to hear him and his thoughts, and we really feel like we were his students in many ways.
Yeah, and often, you know, if you ever watch on TV or you've been there when he is preaching, sometimes he has his paper in front of him, and then he puts the paper down and he looks up, and you know this is a teaching moment. Like, he's ready to speak. But I also think that what sticks out to me is when he was elected, somebody, I can't remember who it was, said that he has the intelligence of 7 college professors and the piety of a child on the day of his first communion. And I think that he really reflects the relationship. Like, he talks about, you know, the friendship with Christ. He really reflects that, because he uses all of his intelligence, you know, for promoting the gospel and promoting the word of God. And I think that's the same thing. Like, I hope that I can pick up on that and do the same thing, and also to teach like that.
Right.
Because he teaches by who he is, and his words. But I mean, he teaches really by who he is.
Right. Well, the best teacher is the one who teaches by witnessing.
And
is
he
that
does
Paul
it.
VI who said that?
Paul VI.
Paul
VI.
Yeah. So he continues driving as he approaches the first location of the papal welcome ceremony. Once he arrives, he is going to be greeted once again by the mayor of the city, the Cardinal Archbishop of Madrid, Cardinal Rocco, I believe is in the Pope Mobile. I haven't had a chance to glance in there, but traditionally the Cardinal that is of the hosting city will ride in the Pope Mobile with the Holy Father.
You know, Pedro, all of this conversation that we're having as we're watching the Pope reach his destination reminds me in some respects of the catechesis sessions that have continually occurred today, as they did yesterday, and today in this center we heard from our own Archbishop Michael Miller from Vancouver, certainly one of my own, a Basilian himself, and he reiterated very much what the Australian Cardinal Pell had talked about in regards to that all of this doesn't mean a whole lot. These days don't mean a whole lot unless there's some sort of action that follows. And Archbishop Miller actually referred to the gospel, the same gospel that the Pope will use later on this evening. And Archbishop Miller said that we must be hearers and doers of the word, and called these days, these World Youth Days, days of decision. And so it just reiterates, I mean, the seeds of vocation, whether it be to religious life or to priesthood or to even marriage, but some form of ministry in the church. I mean, these are really days of decisions in which seeds are planted, and there really is an encouragement of these young people to say, choose your mission, to kind of reiterate some of what Pell we talked about the other night.
What Cardinal Pell said in Sydney 3 years ago.
For these to be days of decision, for these young people to not get lost in the options, but to really choose a mission and live it.
And also what Cardinal Rocco, in his homily of Tuesday, spoke in terms of World Youth Day being an encounter with Christ, and that we should let ourselves be encountered by Christ. And I've always, not always, but I grew to learn that when you have an encounter with Christ, it leads to a calling. You don't just encounter Christ and that's the end of it. It leads to a calling, and that's, I mean, vocation. That's what a vocation is.
Right.
And in his message for the World Youth Day, like the Holy Father, he went through and he talked about how every generation really feels called to do something exceptional. Like nobody wants to do anything that's just normal. And I guess that's the beauty of the World Youth Day, is that you're reaching to that call. That's a natural call anyway.
You can tell we're getting closer because the crowds are certainly intensifying in numbers, and the flags are also doing so.
Yes, you can see the flags. And I believe actually that the previous shot, you could see a little bit of the monument, las puertas de Alcalá, la puerta de Alcalá, the doors of Alcalá.
There we are. That's the shot.
There it is. So that's the Plaza de Independencia, Independence Square, sort of kitty corner of the Parque Retiro Park, which is sort of the central park. It's a huge park in the middle of Madrid, where the largest vocation fair.
That's right. It's also where the Festival of Forgiveness, all of the reconciliation confessionals are there. So there's a number of activities that are centered out of that park. It really is a magnificent park. I've been running it in the mornings.
Every morning.
Trying to, not quite every morning, trying to. And it really is a beautiful park.
Now, yes, and you see the motorcade slowing down. So once the Pope Mobile arrives, the Holy Father will descend from the vehicle with Cardinal Rocco. They're going to be received by 4 policemen, and 2. You'll see they're traditional. They're called maceros. They're dressed in their traditional sort of honor guard costumes. I guess they're not really costumes. They're uniforms.
They're uniforms. I wanted to point out as well that we just passed a large block of young people in green, kind of a light green shirt, and those are all the volunteers for World Youth Day. So that's their uniform that they're wearing, and they really have done an outstanding job helping pilgrims get from one place to another.
Yes, you see them everywhere. And they're not just local youth, they're young people from all over the world. Our first encounter with volunteers with a group of Polish volunteers.
That's right.
Yes.
This is certainly a moment that some of the pilgrims have been waiting for. I imagine if they're about there, they've been waiting in that sun quite a while.
Yes, we were told that it was probably a good idea to be there about 2 hours early,
2 hours
5
early.
o'clock, and there's been several road closures, and
And it's a warm day here in Madrid. It's one of the warmer days we've had all week long.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, you can hear them chanting in the background.
Yes.
Yeah, Sister, I bet when you said yes to your own vocation, you probably didn't think you'd be providing a commentary on the arrival of the Holy Father.
I wouldn't have thought it 2 days ago.
That's right.
There he is, followed by his secretary and the Cardinal Archbishop of Madrid, Cardinal Antonio Maria Rocco Varela. And he's being greeted by the mayor of Madrid, and the mayor's wife.
And he's now being handed the keys to the city.
Now, what's the symbolism of that?
Well, usually, I guess it means that the doors of the city are open to you, so you're an honored guest. If you came to my home and I gave you a key, it means that you can come and go as you please.
That's beautiful.
It's a very hospitable gesture. The mayor of Madrid, his name is Alberto Ruiz Gallardón, and his wife. And there are also several other members of the, I guess, his staff, the municipal staff.
And there we can see some of the honor guard in the background.
And the Holy Father will be greeted by a group of young people. There are 52 of them, although I don't believe he's going to greet personally all 52 of them, but representing the 5 continents. And this is an interesting take on the welcoming of the nations. I know at least Pope John Paul II would call the nations of all the continents, they would call them each country. And in Toronto, for example, we had a parade of flags as the countries were called. In other places in Rome 2000, the Holy Father called each country, and then you get the cheers.
Does every country have a representative for this road?
Usually, there are representatives from each country because every Episcopal conference is represented, and every Episcopal conference will send delegates. So we see the young people standing there. They're going to greet the Holy Father.
And you will hear the Holy Father will address the youth in many of their own languages here at this address coming up.
There it is, La Puerta de Alcalá, the door of Alcalá. Very well-known monument in the city of Madrid.
It's interesting when the Holy Father arrived in Sydney, I was actually part of the team that put together his arrival, and I had a chance to be with. He actually met 16 young people on a boat through Sydney Harbor, and we were riding in the boat with the 16 young people up to go pick up the Holy Father, and I had a chance to spend some time with those 16 young people, just the 17 of us. Right before they were going to meet the Pope, and there's so much excitement, and they're so nervous, and they want to represent their country well, and they don't know what they're going to say, and then the moment comes, and grace takes over, and they were really just, they were brilliant, and really had some time to spend a moment chatting with the Holy Father, as you see here. I mean, there's a few words that are able to be exchanged.
One of the more moving moments for me at World Youth Day in Toronto, because I actually also had a chance in the planning of the papal welcome ceremony for Toronto in 2002. And we had the stage, which is also very common for these type of ceremonies, where the stage is, the Holy Father has young people on stage with him. And at the end of the ceremony, young people, they started getting closer and closer to where Pope John Paul II was sitting, and the Vatican security, they weren't too sure about what to do about this, and the Holy Father just waved the security off, and he had the young people right at his feet. It was very moving to see how he was already quite old and infirm, and he still, that gesture of, yes, you can be close to me. It was very moving for me.
I just keep thinking of that movie where it's about a baseball field, but it says if you build it, they will come. And
Field of Dreams.
Yes.
Right, but it's like John Paul II. He really built the World Youth Day, and everybody comes.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing.
Yes, absolutely. He invited them, and they came.
It's interesting in some of the papers here regionally, they've been commenting, there's always the various protests and things that happen. And one opinion piece that was written talked about, the real story is not that. The real story is this person that brings with him, they're saying roughly 1.5 million young people have traveled here, to follow this man because of something that he inspires in them. And that is the real story here, is that, that there is this great following, and I think he inspires them to do so.
Yes. And here we see, it looks like he is greeting all 52 of them, and many of them wearing their national costumes.
Very traditional.
It's nice to see that they're able to exchange a few words.
Look how present he is to each person.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Really is a beautiful sight.
The weather held out too. This morning it was a little bit rainy. Everything's clear now.
Yeah, actually, the days, while they have been warm, they have been stunningly beautiful days that we've had here.
Some young people not sure exactly what's happening. Now the Holy Father will walk through the doors, or through the main door, and he's walking through with the young people from each continent. And now the Holy Father is being presented with, it's an olive sapling, and it looks like a little tree, not quite a sapling. And he is symbolically adding soil to the pot, the symbolism of him planting.
Well, and there's deeper symbolism to this.
There is.
One, the olive industry here in Spain is a significant industry, but also this really brings out the theme of this World Youth Day, this idea of being planted and rooted and built up and firm in our faith. And so this gesture is really a symbol of all that these days have been centering around.
And this is the moment that a lot of people have been waiting for, the Andalusian horses. Many people might be familiar with the dancing horses of Vienna. Well, it's the same, I guess, family of horses. This particular group based in the city of Andalusia, and they are doing quite the display here for the Holy Father. now the group of writers will present the Holy Father with a special gift. Pope Benedict XVI, not unlike Pope John Paul, is quite fluent in many languages. And in fact, Spanish is one of his better languages. So it's nice to see him having, exchanging a few words with,
that's right,
with the children.
And he really does take the time to do so with each one of them.
And now there's a moment that I'm waiting for. I hope that we get to see it. It's a gesture of peace, where there are 4,000 balloons that are supposed to be let off up into the air with the Spanish colors, yellow and white. They're also the Vatican
the
colors.
papal colors, they get the same thing.
Vatican colors. Now you see that the Holy Father is getting back into the Pope Mobile, not because the celebration is over, but this part of the celebration is over.
Yes, he now continues on.
He's going to continue. This drive-through will probably be a little slower as he moves towards the Cibeles Square, where the liturgical part of the ceremony will take place.
I think, is that the balloons in the background?
I'm not sure. They look like ribbons.
No.
It's not a very far distance from one location to the other.
You see, it's quite a wide road. It's a 4 or 6 lane.
Yeah, this is one of the major arteries for the city.
And these, this is a traditional. It's called a tuna. Una tuna. It's a typical traditional Spanish music group. There are 100 singers.
Oh,
here we see the balloons, or at least the white balloons.
Oh, they're like doves.
They look like doves.
The doves.
Oh, beautiful.
And the singers, the tuneros, are singing a traditional Spanish song. It's comprised by 2 groups from the University of Granada. And there we see some of the balloons.
Look at all the different nations represented. You can see all those flags.
An interesting note about the uniform of the tuneros is that they have a sort of a cape, and when the cape is they wrap themselves in the cape, it almost looks like a cassock or a monk's habit. But when they open the cape, their uniform looks almost like a Swiss Guard uniform. So that's an interesting.
It is interesting. There are those volunteers, yeah. Some of them have been working very long, hard hours for this moment.
Yeah.
I like it when the Holy Father, when sometimes he waves, he looks like he's playing the piano. Sometimes you see him do that.
He's an accomplished piano player, actually. And here we're coming up on Plaza de Cibeles.
So again, for those of you that were watching on Tuesday for the opening mass, this is the same central square or plaza where the opening mass took place. There's a large papal stage that has been built in front of this beautiful castle-looking building, which is actually City Hall.
City Hall.
Or the municipality of Madrid.
So Pedro, I think it's safe to say there do seem to be a few more people here now
than there were on Tuesday. Absolutely.
He seems to be making an entire loop around the fountain.
And he's continuing on. So maybe we should, you can see a little bit from the aerial view, so they basically have closed down an intersection. It's two roads, but an intersection in four directions, almost making the shape of a cross. And we have pilgrims lining the roads in all four directions.
And sister, you were actually at the opening mass, correct? You were in that intersection?
Well, no. We were actually very far away. We really couldn't see or hear much, but it was just so exciting just to be there, really.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, those, I imagine that the crowds for this go down, and you can kind of see they extend down these streets quite some ways, and there are tree lined, and there's parks, and there's lots of things that kind of cover up even what would be more people underneath the trees.
Yeah.
And they've got television screens and speakers going multiple levels back down these streets so that pilgrims have a chance to see as much as they can.
Look at that.
Now we can hear the theme song. This is the theme song of this 26th World Youth Day, Firmes en la Fe, Firm in the Faith. There's a large choir and the World Youth Day Symphonic orchestra, leading everybody and singing the theme song.
Who wrote the theme song? Was it a young?
The theme song was written by a bishop and a priest.
Oh, was it?
Who are involved in the organizing committee. One I can't remember who, but one wrote the music and one wrote the lyrics.
What you see in the top corner of the screen is actually Retiro Park. So that's part of that, so you kind of get an idea of the distances between things. At some point, he will have to turn around.
I think that this is how, as far as he's going.
Okay.
Basically, up to the next intersection or square. Here's the WYD State Choir.
Right, so he's now heading back to the plaza. One of the activities that I heard was going to take place, I don't know if it happened or if we missed it, but along the route, the Holy Father was going to drive past a hospital, Hospital San Rafael, which is run by the Order of the St. John Hospitallers, and that several of the patients, or a lot of the patients, were going to release also balloons with special petitions for their healing inside the balloons.
How beautiful.
The version of the theme song that we're listening to is the international version. Again, typical. Every World Youth Day will have theme song probably written in the local language, and then there are various different verses that are written, and usually English, French, Spanish, and Italian. You get the 4 verses. The theme song was written by Bishop Cesar Franco, who is the auxiliary bishop of Madrid, and he's also the World Youth Day coordinator.
these scenes really are one of the great kind of moments, I think, of World Youth Day, when you see the many different flags that fly, and you realize, you know, just how vast this faith really is, and how many different ways it's celebrated. I always enjoy seeing the different parade of flags that have become such a part of the World Youth Day experience.
And there's something, I mean, I know on Tuesday we were speaking, Father Chris, about the idea of closing down 2, 4, 6, however many major arteries in the middle of a city. But I'm looking at this thinking that that's not a bad idea to have that sort of a witness in the middle of the city, rather than having it all segregated to a section.
You know, I've been reflecting a little bit myself on, because some of the daily readings have been giving the idea that the themes of weddings have been coming up, and you know, I mean, some people would talk about the cost of such things, and I thought, you know, but even when times are desperate, or there, you know, things are not going as well as we may like, we need moments for hope. We need reasons for hope, and you don't. I mean, you know, would a father, even if things were really tight, not want to throw the very best wedding for their family, right? And you do spend something, because the seeds that are planted from these kinds of things, as we've talked about, I mean, this has the potential, you know, to have significant changes, and we have seen that in World Youth Days in the past. In my own home country of the United States, I've watched it over the years. We've certainly seen it in Canada. It's been great to be here with so many friends from Sydney, and they've all spoken to me about you know, just in the few years that have passed, there's been such a significant change, not just in the Catholic Church that resides, but also in the overall joy and hope. It seems to elevate an entire group of people, whether they be Catholic or not. And so we need these moments, you know, these kind of festivals and things. We need a reason to celebrate. We need a reason to come together, and to transcend the usual monotony and mundane parts of our day. And so this World Youth Day really does do that. And I think we will continue to see in the days that come, especially now with the presence of the Holy Father, that they will do that.
I was very impressed on Tuesday with the gathering here at
the Love and Life
and Life Center. Yeah, when we saw all the students, or all the pilgrims from Australia, and how on fire they still are from World Youth Day, it was really visible. It was really very powerful.
Well, it's true. World Youth Day is an investment.
It is.
In something more important than, you know, it's not a financial investment. It's a spiritual investment. And we see that. I mean, we've started off talking about vocations, and we certainly see it in vocations. We didn't speak, Father Chris, about your own vocation and how that seed was planted in Denver.
Right.
And even my own being in formation for the permanent diaconate. Yeah. And how that sort of began in Toronto as well.
And much like the sapling that was planted, I mean, you know, there will be struggles. It won't grow, you know, all at one time. It'll have its, you know, slower moments of growth and faster moments of growth. And these seeds do take time. And made my own vocation. I wasn't. I went to World Youth Day in Denver in 1993, and I then responded, but then I had stopped, and I went on a different path for a while, and then I came back, and I've talked to many other priests now who were in have similar stories. Their vocation was inspired by a moment just like the ones we're seeing now, and they may respond, but then they may, you know, try something else. They may come back to it. I mean, just like if anybody who's ever gardened knows that, you know, gardening, I mean, you have to nurture something, and sometimes it doesn't work out like you want it to, and then other times it just blossoms with great ease. It's all a matter of how it takes.
Yes.
And so this image of planting, I think, to me resonates a great deal, because that's very much been my experience. Now, we should note that this is not a mass that's about to take place, but this is a liturgical ceremony. And so the Pope has just been vested, as it would. He's just put on a stole, and we'll be beginning kind of really the prayerful part of this gathering. Up until now, it's really been more of a kind of a cultural celebration. But now this is a moment where we'll be able to, the Holy Father will lead us in a moment of prayer and reflection.
We're listening to another great World Youth Day hymn. It's not a theme song, but I think for a lot of people it is a little bit of a theme. Jesus Christ, You're My Life. I think we already spoke about this. It's one of the greatest liturgical songs that has ever been written. It was written for Rome in 2000, written by Monsignor Marco Fecina, who is a wonderful liturgical composer in Rome. It was sung in Rome, it was sung in Toronto, it was sung in Sydney, and I'm delighted to hear it here in Madrid, because I think it's now a tradition. This is the song that links all the World Youth Days.
It's interesting, after the opening Mass where we heard it, it actually was the status of many of my friends on Facebook, this Jesus Christ is the light of my life idea. So it clearly captures the imagination of a lot of people.
And it's important to, I don't know if we need to remind ourselves, but to remind ourselves that we're not here because of the Pope. We're not here because it's a celebration. I mean, all those things are important, but we're here because Jesus Christ is our life. We're here to allow ourselves to be encountered by Jesus. Jesus is the one who encounters us, who gives us life.
And you could even see that at the opening Mass. It was very hard to get to communion, and all the different pilgrims were helping each other to get there to receive the Eucharist.
Our audience may be wondering, as the Pope walked on stage, I mean, there was what looked like a bit of a smoke that appeared from the top of the altar. It's actually a fine mist, and again, because of the heat, that's present in many of the buildings here as you walk out onto the patios, and you'll be sitting out. I mean, there's many people have their lunch and their dinner outside, and you'll have this very fine mist that's just enough to keep you cool, but not enough to get you wet, and that's what you see now.
The Holy Father is now being greeted by the Cardinal, Archbishop of Rome.
He welcomes the Pope to the city.
Os han dado la bienvenida a la histórica Puerta de Alcalá, después que el excelentísimo señor alcalde os haya entregado las llaves de esta ciudad abierta de corazón y noble de sentimientos, en la cual nadie es forastero.
And the Cardinal says, Holy Father, you have come to Madrid, the capital of Spain, to preside at this 26th World Youth Day. Youth of the 5 continents, he says, have welcomed you in the historic Puerta de Alcalá, after the mayor handed over the keys of the city with its open heart and its noble feelings, a city in which nobody is a stranger, but everyone is a brother.
Muchos han ido llegando.
And he goes on to say the Plaza de las Cibeles, where we find the most iconic and popular of all the squares in Madrid, today houses the festive presence of this huge crowd of young people from all corners of the earth who are welcoming you with joy and enthusiasm as he who comes in the name of the Lord. The Cardinal says many people have been arriving in Madrid with a large number of their Spanish peers after making a fruitful pilgrimage through the dioceses, the cities and the towns of Spain. Here they are, he says, dear Holy Father, to live this meeting with the Pope as sons and brothers of the same Church, the new people of God that knows no boundaries. Cardinal Rauco says they have endorsed the lofty spiritual and apostolic goal that their father and shepherd of the Universal Church proposes, that their lives be rooted in Christ and built up on him to stand firm in the faith. Faith in Jesus Christ, their brother and friend, their Lord and Saviour. Their joy, radiant and happy, is more than understandable, beloved Holy Father. The successor of Peter, the vicar of Christ, and head of the whole Church, the house of the living God. He comes to meet and strengthen them in faith that opens his heart to the grace and love of Jesus Christ that can change their lives forever and fill them with joy, a contagious joy that can transform not only their lives but also their families and their communities. The Pope calls them to be witnesses. The Cardinal says Spain, this ancient nation and community of people who began its history by listening to and embracing the apostolic preaching, is experiencing this right now. These young people who since Tuesday have been filling the streets and squares of Madrid, and in the days of the previous week were filling many other places in Spain, you can tell that they understand the most intimate meaning of their lives. They do not lack anything because they do not lack Christ. And Cardinal Rauco, the Archbishop of Madrid, goes on to say, this city, Madrid, dear Holy Father, the diocesan church, its suffragan diocese, and all the dioceses of Spain welcome you with gratitude and feeling, sharing the same love for the Pope as the young people are feeling and expressing. Your visit, he says, is a visit of exceptional value. With you comes the young church, accompanied by their diocesan bishops, priests, consecrated people in numbers and variety which truly represent a Catholic, universal church. Christ, the risen Lord, is walking by our side. And the Cardinal concludes by saying, with the Church of Spain, Spanish society, its authorities, who have been extremely generous in arranging everything necessary for the preparation of this World Youth Day, but above all, the vast majority of Spanish people, they receive and greet you with feelings of reverence and veneration for 2,000 years of Christian tradition. Welcome, dear Holy Father, says Cardinal Rauco. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Madrid and Spain, the Church and society welcome you with the doors of our homes and our hearts open wide. The prayer of our communities of contemplative life will also be with us these days, with an exquisite sense of love for the Pope, the Church and its youth. We entrust to the maternal care of Mary, of Our Lady of La Almaduena, patron of Madrid. And the Cardinal concludes by saying, may you have very happy days with us, dear Holy Father. Happy in the risen Christ. And the enthusiasm, the energy of the young people gathered here has to be seen, to be believed, as we hear that familiar cry in whichever language, Benedictus, Benedetto, the cry going up from the young people as they wave their flags representing so many different countries, so many different dioceses, representing, as the Cardinal said, the universal church.
książce Jezus z Nazaretu uczysz nas, że spożywanie chleba służy pogłębieniu wzajemnych więzi. My młodzi, którzy przybyliśmy tutaj z całej Europy, od koła podbiegunowego aż po wybrzeża Morza
And we listen now as 5 young people who have been selected to represent the different countries, the different continents, come forward to welcome the Pope with an offering representing their countries and their continents. Look at the enthusiasm on the Pope's face, a warm smile for the first speaker. Her name is Asia. She is Polish and she's offering bread and salt to Pope Benedict. Of course, all the spiritual significance of bread and salt throughout the Gospels, but also a very practical gift, a gift of bread, not just spiritual bread of life, but also bread
on behalf of all the people
to
of
nourish
Africa,
people.
bananas and coffee. On behalf of all the people of Africa.
And the second young person, his name is Alex. He is, no, I think they're in the different order because he's bringing coffee wrapped in banana leaves. From Australia.
안녕하십니까, 교황님. 환영합니다. Holy
Next young lady.
This gift of rice expresses the joy that the peoples of the West Asian continent feel in welcoming you, our beloved Father. Here, you will meet young people who come from the mainland of the Near and Far East, as well as from islands and peninsulas scattered throughout the Pacific Ocean.
Ji In there, the next young lady coming forward with a gift for the Pope. She is from Korea, and as you heard, she's giving the Holy Father a gift of rice, one of the staples of so many countries across the great continent of Asia. And as she said, here at World Youth Day, the Pope will be speaking to people from so many different countries, mainlands, but also islands scattered across the Pacific Ocean.
Este sombrero representa la alegría que nos identifica a los pueblos americanos. Hemos venido a escuchar su palabra y llevar al nuevo mundo el mensaje de la cruz de los jóvenes.
And the next young man, Yester from Honduras, giving the Holy Father a sombrero, as he says, a symbol of the joy. The Holy Father placing it on his head to show how grateful he is for this gift from the young man. The joy of all the peoples of the Americas as they come to listen to the message that the Holy Father brings.
I come from Japan. This gift of flowers is present from the whole of Asia.
Another gift from the continent of Asia, as this young lady in traditional Japanese dress comes forward and presents the Holy Father with her gift of a beautiful garland of flowers. The Pope blessing them. Yes, and he's going to put that one around his neck as well. Of course, such a traditional sign of greeting and welcome, the garland of flowers that is placed around a visitor's neck in so many of the Asian countries. And So the 5 different young people representing the different continents, welcoming in a very individual and a very colourful way Pope Benedict to Madrid for the opening.
Santo Padre, han venido con nosotros los jóvenes de los 5 continentes, muchos con sus parroquias y con sus pastores. Muchos pertenecen a movimientos y organizaciones juveniles de la Iglesia. Muchos prestan sus servicios de voluntariado y de misión en tierras remotas y con personas de toda condición.
Muchos jóvenes venidos de todas partes del mundo pertenecen al camino neocatecumenal.
And the young man and young woman telling the Holy Father how people have come from all over the world, but also from many of the different movements represented in the church. The Emmanuel movement we heard, Communion and Liberation, the Focolare movement, the Neo-Catechumenal Way.
Con las congregaciones marianas, con las juventudes vicencianas, con amigos de los cursillos de cristiandad y con los jóvenes de Acción Católica.
Hay cantidad de jóvenes que, sin pertenecer a ningún grupo concreto, participan de la espiritualidad o del carisma de otras instituciones de la Iglesia. Todos son hermanos en la fe y amigos entrañables en esta Jornada Mundial de la Juventud.
Young people from so many of these different movements who have inspired and helped them on their way.
From all over Africa, you can see them, Holy Father, as they wave their flags.
We have friends from all over America who have also come to Madrid, from North America, Central America, and South America. Many friends have joined us from Oceania after a long journey. Can you see them, Holy Father?
And young people from all over Asia are also here with us. Look at them, Holy Father.
Die Europäer dürfen natürlich auch nicht fehlen, Eure Heiligkeit. Hier sind sie, wahnsinnig viele Länder und wahnsinnig viele Jugendliche.
So greetings from literally across all the 5 continents, but also from a little closer to home perhaps than those who've travelled from the far-flung reaches of the Pacific. Also those from Europe, from countries neighbouring to Spain. All of them come here to listen to the Holy Father's message.
Al país español y a la cultura española.
And a particular cheer going up there from all the Spanish young people who have worked, many of them, so hard over the past months. Many of them offering their services to make this World Youth Day a particularly memorable occasion for all the pilgrims and visitors.
De los jóvenes que han acudido a su llamada para participar en la Jornada Mundial de la Juventud, provenientes de los 5 continentes, hablando diferentes lenguas, compartiendo diferentes culturas, pero unidos por el anhelo de encontrar esa verdad absoluta que los ayudará a encontrar el amor verdadero. Nuestro querido Juan Pablo II.
And the cheer going up there again as this young lady mentions the founder of the original World Youth Days, Pope John Paul II.
Todos aquí, la juventud de la Iglesia, reunidos en Madrid, quisiéramos escuchar su palabra, Santo Padre. Muchísimas gracias.
And the young lady concludes by saying how all these young people, so different in their culture, in their background, in their languages, and yet all of them here today to welcome the Pope and to listen to the message that he brings them. A message of hope, despite the challenges they face. A message of hope in the living Christ. And we listen once again to the strains of that familiar World Youth Day anthem, Firmes in la Fe, firm in faith. Great cheer going up there from the crowds of hundreds of thousands of enthusiastic young people from right across the world who listen and recognize the strains of that anthem, the World Youth Day anthem for 2011, the anthem Firmes in la Fe, firm in faith, which is the theme of this World Youth Day, which opened on Tuesday and comes now to its climax as Pope Benedict prepares to address the crowds and to bring them his message of hope.
Es una inmensa alegría encontrarme aquí con vosotros en el centro de esta bella ciudad de Madrid, cuyas llaves ha tenido la amabilidad de entregarme el señor alcalde. Hoy es también capital de los jóvenes del mundo. ¿Y dónde?
In his words of greeting, the Pope says, "Dear young friends, it is a great joy for me to meet you here in the heart of this lovely city of Madrid, whose keys the Lord Mayor has kindly presented me. Today," he says, "Madrid is also the capital of the world's young people, and the gaze of the whole church is fixed here. The Lord," he says, "has brought us together here so that during these days we can experience the beauty of World Youth Day. Through your presence and your participation in these celebrations," he says, "the name of Christ will echo throughout this great city." Let us pray, the Pope says, that his message of hope and love will also resound in the hearts of those who are not believers or who have grown distant from the Church. Many thanks, he says, for the splendid welcome which you gave me as I entered the city, a sign of your love and closeness to the successor of St. Peter.
Saludo al señor Cardinal Stanislas Rulko, presidente del Pontificio Consejo para los Laicos, y a sus colaboradores en este dicasterio, agradeciendo todo el trabajo realizado.
Pope Benedict goes on to greet Cardinal Stanislaw Rilko, President of the Pontifical Council for the Laity, and his staff in the Council, with gratitude for all the work that they have done in the lead-up to this World Youth Day. He also thanks Cardinal Antonio Maria Rauco Varela, the Archbishop of Madrid, for his kind words and for the efforts made by the Archdiocese, along with the other dioceses of Spain, in preparing for this World Youth Day. My thanks, the Pope says, also go to all those in so many other churches throughout the world who have generously contributed to its preparation. I express my appreciation, he goes on, to the national, the autonomous, regional and local authorities for their presence and for their generous help in ensuring the good organization of this great event.
Gracias a los hermanos en el episcopado, a los sacerdotes, seminaristas, personas consagradas,
and the Pope continues, my thanks also go to my brother bishops, the priests, the seminarians, the consecrated men and women, and all the faithful present here today, who have helped to prepare the young people to experience these intense days of pilgrimage towards an encounter with Christ. He says, I offer all of you a heartfelt greeting in the Lord, and I repeat that it is a great blessing for me to be here with you. May the flame of Christ's love always burn bright in your hearts, he says.
Vous avez répondu nombreux à l'appel du Seigneur à venir le rencontrer à Madrid. Je vous en félicite.
And now the Pope addresses himself to all those from French-speaking countries, and you can hear there are a lot of them cheering and showing their appreciation for his words. Dear young French-speaking people, he says, you have responded in great numbers to the Lord's call to come and meet him in Madrid. I congratulate you for this. He says, welcome to World Youth Day. You have brought with you profound questions, and you are seeking answers. It is always a good thing to keep seeking, the Pope tells them. Above all, seek the truth, which is not an idea or an ideology or a slogan, but a person, Christ, God himself, who has come into our midst. You rightly wish to plant your faith in Him, to ground your life in Christ. He has always loved you, and He knows you better than anyone else. The Pope says, may these days so rich in prayer and teaching and encounters help you to rediscover this, so that you may love Him all the more. May Christ accompany you during this special time.
We have come to Madrid. May these days of prayer, friendship, and celebration bring us closer to each other and to the Lord Jesus. Make trust in Christ's word the foundation of your lives. Planted and built up in Him, firm in the faith and open to the power of the Spirit, you will find your place in God's plan and enrich the Church with your gifts. Let us pray for one another so that we may be joyful witnesses to Christ, today and always. God bless you all.
And a rousing cheer there from all the English-speaking pilgrims to this World Youth Day. And after welcoming all those English-speaking visitors, the Pope now speaks in his native tongue, in German, to the German-speaking visitors, greeting all of them with great affection. He says, I am happy that you have come in such great numbers. During these days, we want together to confess our faith in Jesus Christ, to deepen that faith and to pass it on. Let us realize ever anew that Jesus is the one who gives true meaning to our lives. Let us open our hearts to Christ. May He grant all of us a joyful and blessed time here in Madrid. And now, words of greeting to the young Italians. I greet you with great affection, the Pope says, and I'm delighted that so many of you have come here filled with the joy of your faith. Experience these days, he says, in a spirit of intense prayer and fraternity, and testify to the vitality of the Church in Italy, in its parishes, its associations, and its movements. Share this wealth with everyone, he says. And the great cheer from the Italians, always very numerous wherever these World Youth Days are held. And now greetings in Portuguese. Again, a very significant number of pilgrims from Portugal, from Brazil, no doubt, and from the Portuguese-speaking nations of Africa. Dear young people, the Pope says, of the different countries whose official language is Portuguese, and all those who accompany you, welcome to Madrid. I greet all of you with friendship and affection, and I invite you to draw close to the eternal source of your youth and to know the absolute protagonist of this World Youth Day, and I hope of your own lives, Christ the Lord. In these days, the Pope says, you will personally hear His word resound. Let this word into your hearts. Let it take root and make it the foundation of your lives. Firm in the faith, you will be a link in the great chain of believers. No one can believe without being supported by the faith of others. And by my faith, I also help to support others in the faith. The Church needs you, the Pope says, and you need the Church.
Pozdrawiam Ojciec Polski.
And finally, greetings in Polish. And again, you can hear the cheers from the Polish pilgrims here. Pope Benedict says, I greet the young people who have come from Poland, countrymen of Blessed John Paul II, the founder of World Youth Day. I'm delighted by your presence here in Madrid, and I pray that these days will be good days, days of prayer, in which you will strengthen your relationship with Jesus. May God's Spirit guide you. And so there, the Pope's first words of greeting, words of welcome to the young people in their many different languages, in Spanish, in French, in English, in Italian, in German, and in Polish. And now, in a moment, the Pope will read some words from St. Matthew's Gospel.
Pax vobis. Queridos jóvenes, os invito a acoger solemnemente la palabra de Dios que constituye el fundamento de nuestra vida y que arraigada en nuestros corazones nos permite caminar en la verdad, santidad y justicia.
Let us listen to the word of God, the Pope says, a word which will enable us to walk in truth and in justice. And we're going to listen in a moment to the words of St. Matthew's Gospel.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "Anyone who hears my words and puts them into practice is like the wise man who built his house on rock. When the rainy season set in, the torrents came, and the winds blew and buffeted his house. It did not collapse. It had been solidly set on rock. Anyone who hears my words but does not put them into practice is like the foolish man who built his house on sandy ground. The rains fell, the torrents came, the winds blew and lashed against his house. It collapsed under all this and was completely ruined. This is the gospel of the Lord. Praise you,
story of the wise and the foolish builders. The wise man who builds his house upon the rock, a house that will stand firm, unlike the foolish man who builds his house upon the sand. And Pope Benedict now preparing for his homily, a reflection on the way the young people themselves must build their house on the rock of their faith, how they must be firm in their faith, rooted and built up in Jesus Christ.
Amigos, agradezco las cariñosas palabras que me han dirigido los jóvenes representantes de los 5 continentes y saludo con afecto a todos los que estáis aquí congregados, jóvenes de Oceania, África, America, Asia, Europa.
Pope Benedict begins by saying, "Dear friends, thank you for the kind words addressed to me by the young people representing the 5 continents. I salute with affection all of you gathered here, young people from Oceania, from Africa, America, Asia, and Europe, and also those unable to be here. I always keep you very much in my heart and pray for you. God," the Pope says, "has given me the grace to see and hear you for myself, and as we gather together to listen to his word."
En que se habla de acoger las palabras de Jesús y de ponerlas en práctica.
In the reading which has just been proclaimed, says Pope Benedict, we heard a passage from the Gospel which talks of welcoming the words of Jesus and putting them into practice. There are words which serve only to amuse, as fleeting as an empty breeze. Others, to an extent, to inform us. Those of Jesus, on the other hand, must reach our hearts, must take root and bloom there in all our lives. If not, they remain empty and become ephemeral. They do not bring us to him, and as a result, Christ stays remote, just one voice amongst the many others around us, which are so familiar.
No enseña lo que ha aprendido de otros, sino lo que él mismo es, el único que conoce de verdad el camino de hombre hacia Dios, porque es él quien lo ha abierto para nosotros.
Furthermore, Pope Benedict says, the Master who speaks teaches not something learned from others, but that which he himself is, the only one who truly knows the path of man towards God, because he is the one who opened it up for us. He made it so that we might have authentic lives, lives which are always worth living in every circumstance, and which not even death can destroy. The Gospel continues explaining these things with the evocative image of someone who builds on solid rock, resistant to the onslaught of adversity, in contrast to someone who builds on sand, we would say today in what appears a paradise, but which collapses with the first gust of wind and falls into ruins.
Para que sean en vosotros espíritu y vida, raíces que alimentan vuestro ser, pautas de conducta que nos asemejen a la persona de Cristo.
Dear young people, Pope Benedict goes on, listen closely to the words of the Lord, that they may be for you spirit and life, roots which nourish your being, a rule of life which likens us, poor in spirit, thirsting for justice, merciful, pure in heart, lovers of peace, to the person of Christ. Listen regularly, he says, every day, as if he were the one friend who does not deceive, the one with whom we wish to share the path of life. Of course, you know that when we do not walk beside Christ our guide, we get lost on other paths, like the path of our blind and selfish impulses, or the path of flattering but self-serving suggestions, deceiving, fickle, which leave emptiness and frustration in their wake.
Enraizados en él, vuestro entusiasmo y alegría, vuestros deseos de ir a más.
Use these days, Pope Benedict goes on, to know Christ better and to make sure that rooted in him, your enthusiasm and happiness, your desire to go further, to reach the heights, even God himself, always holds a sure future, because the fullness of life has already been placed within you. Let that life grow with divine grace, generously, without half measures, as you remain steadfast in your aim for holiness. In the face of our weaknesses, which sometimes overwhelm us, the Pope says, we can rely on the mercy of the Lord, who is always ready to help us again, and who offers us pardon in the sacrament of penance. If you build on solid rock, not only your life will be solid and stable, but it will also help project the light of Christ, shining upon those of your own age and upon the whole of humanity, presenting a valid alternative to all those who have fallen short because the essentials in their lives were inconsistent, to all those who are content to follow fashionable ideas. They take shelter in the here and now, forgetting true justice, or they take refuge in their own opinions instead of seeking the simple truth.
Sin adjetivos. Sí, hay muchos que creyéndose dioses piensan no tener necesidad de más raíces ni cimientos que ellos mismos.
Indeed, Pope Benedict continues, there are many who, creating their own gods, believe they need no roots or foundations other than themselves. They take it upon themselves to decide what is true or not, what is good and evil, what is just and unjust, who should live and who can be sacrificed in the interests of other preferences, leaving each step to chance with no clear path, letting themselves be led by the whim of each moment. These temptations, the Pope says, are always lying in wait. It is important not to give in to them, because in reality they lead to something so evanescent, like an existence with no horizons, a liberty without God. We, on the other hand, know well that we have been created free in the image of God, precisely so that we may be in the forefront of the search for truth and goodness, responsible for our actions, not mere blind executives, but creative co-workers in the task of cultivating and beautifying the work of creation.
Alguien que pueda dialogar con él y amarle. Por Cristo lo podemos conseguir verdaderamente.
God is looking for a responsible interlocutor, the Pope says, someone who can dialogue with him, and love him. Through Christ we can truly succeed, and established in him we give wings to our freedom. Is this not the great reason for our joy? Isn't this the firm ground upon which to build the civilization of love and life, capable of humanizing all of us?
Sobre el cimiento firme que es Cristo. Esta sabiduría y prudencia guiará vuestros pasos. Nada será temblar, en vuestro corazón reinará la paz.
Dear friends, says Pope Benedict, be prudent and wise. Build your lives upon the firm foundation, which is Christ. This wisdom and prudence will guide your steps. Nothing will make you fear, and peace will reign in your hearts. Then, he says, you will be blessed and happy, and your happiness will influence others. They will wonder what the secret of your life is, and they will discover that the rock which underpins the entire building and upon which rests your whole existence is the very person of Christ, your friend, your brother and Lord, the Son of God incarnate, who gives meaning to all the universe.
A todos los hombres, velando continuamente con amor por cada uno de nosotros.
He died for us all, the Pope says, rising that we might have life. And now, from the throne of the Father, he accompanies all men and women, watching continually over each one of us. And in conclusion, the Pope says, I commend the fruits of this World Youth Day to the Most Holy Virgin Mary, who said yes to the will of God, and teaches us a unique example of fidelity to her divine Son, whom she followed to his death upon the cross. Let us meditate upon this more deeply in the Stations of the Cross. And let us pray that, like her, our yes to Christ today may be an unconditional yes to his friendship, both at the end of this day and throughout our entire lives. Cheers and cries of support for the Pope once again rising from this great crowd of young men and women from all across the world, from all the 5 continents, rising to greet the Pope.
Hermanos y hermanas, dirigamos esta oración a Dios, Padre Todopoderoso, que quiere que todos los hombres se salven y lleguen al conocimiento de la verdad.
And Pope Benedict now introduces the prayers of the faithful, which will mark the conclusion of this first great event of World Youth Day 2011.
Pasteur de l'Église universelle, pour qu'il nous enseigne avec sagesse, nous guide avec la force d'un apôtre et nous sanctifie par la grâce du Christ. Nous demeurerons ainsi fidèles au Seigneur jusqu'à la fin des temps.
And the first prayer there in French for Pope Benedict, the supreme pastor of the Church, as he leads us all and strengthens us, as indeed he's doing here at World Youth Day, strengthens each one of us in the faith.
Kwa vijana waliojumuika hapa, walioguswa katika neno la Bwana na kuwa imara katika imani, ili tuwe mashahidi wajasiri wa Injili na kuleta wokovu wa Yesu Kristu katika mazingira zote.
Por todos los jóvenes que aún no creen en Cristo, para que, mediante el don de la fe y la compañía de la Iglesia, descubran que solo en Él tenemos la salvación que nos libra de nuestros pecados y el camino hacia la vida eterna.
They're read in Spanish by a young lady in traditional Spanish costume, really representing these prayers, as indeed they do in every liturgy, the universal church.
من أجل الفقراء والمهمشين الجياع والعطاش لمن لا مأوى لهم أو عمل والمستبعدين بأنواع شتى للمسنين والمرضى لمن يعيشون وحيدين لكي يجدوا دوما بجنبهم شهودا لمحبة المسيح يخففون من ألمهم ويعززون رجاءهم.
They're there in Arabic, representing the young people who have come from all the Arabic-speaking countries, where some of them experience great difficulty in being firm in the faith.
Rappresentati dai giovani di questa grande assemblea, perché vivano sempre in pace e nella concordia, rispettino i diritti umani, pratichino la giustizia, la verità, la fraternità e cerchino sempre i segni che Dio manda per arrivare a Lui.
Let's pray there in Italian for all the young people gathered here at World Youth Day and all those following the celebrations on radio and television or the internet.
Oh Dios, refugio y fortaleza nuestra, escucha las oraciones de tu iglesia y concédenos con bondad lo que te pedimos con fe, por Jesucristo nuestro Señor. Precepti salutaribus moniti et divina institutione formati audemus dicere, Pater noster, qui es in celis, sanctificetur nomen tuum, adveniat regnum tuum, fiat voluntas tua, sicut in cielo et in terra. Panem nostrum quotidianum da nobis hodie, et dimitte nobis debita nostra, sicut et nos dimittimus debitoribus nostris, et ne nos inducas in tentatione, sed libera nos malo. Oh Señor Jesucristo, que has convocado esta gran asamblea de jóvenes para que durante estos días escuchen tu palabra, celebren tu salvación y vivan en la comunión de tu cuerpo, que es la Iglesia, te pedimos que, animados por el Espíritu de la verdad, cumplan siempre la voluntad del Padre y, arraigados y edificados en ti, vivan firmes en la fe y sean para todo el mundo testigos de tu infinito amor hacia todos los hombres, tú que vives y reinas por los siglos de los siglos. Dominus vobiscum, sit nomen Domini benedictum, adiutorium nostrum in nomine Domini, benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus.
So with this, we conclude the papal welcome ceremony. A little unusual to end with the salve, although a nice touch.
Well, it's the emphasis of as this World Youth Day is on Mary, so it's very fitting.
The Holy Father is going now to go back to the Nunciature for a private dinner.
Again, we saw many of the common themes that we've been talking about this evening. This idea of vocations, this idea of these great images and the connection to the history of Spain. So these same ideas keep coming back and back over and over again. And of course, the theme of itself, this building up and this planting with the Word of God that is taking place.
Definitely with the theme of this World Youth Day, but even the theme of being sent, of taking your faith and putting it to practice. Very prominent theme in the Gospel reading.
Right. Yeah, he commented that that when the youth build on rock, they will create an ability to shine the light of Christ, and that will present a valid alternative to all who have fallen short, and that ultimately that valid alternative is the person of Christ himself.
He said that God is looking for people that are willing to enter into a dialogue with him.
Yeah.
Yes, and that goes back to that.
The idea of a counter.
Response,
and
the idea of a response. I liked when he said that to make sure that you're rooted in Him, so that your enthusiasm and your happiness and your desire to go further, to reach the heights. Again, he's recognizing that young people desire greatness, and this we live in a society that sort of assumes that we should strive for mediocrity, but that's not what young people have planted in their hearts.
That's right.
They desire greatness, and they were built or designed for greatness.
Right.
And the way to achieve that greatness is to plant yourself, root yourself in Christ.
And that creates a great witness for other people. And he even said that people will wonder what the secret of life is, and it's Christ.
Right.
Yeah.
Certainly a glorious ending.
Or a beginning, as you might say. There's another way of looking at it.
A glorious beginning to the next couple days. He also finished the homily inviting us to enter into the sort of World Youth Day Triduum that happens with the Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Tomorrow the main event is the Way of the Cross. And again, bringing Mary into the message that we ought to say yes, and we should begin to meditate on that through the Stations of the Cross that are going to take place tomorrow. And you'll see tomorrow that there is a very strong emphasis on the figure of Mary, with the way the Stations of the Cross are being presented here in Madrid.
It's a great view of the capital of the world's youth, as he called Madrid during these days.
And I guess this is another little opportunity for a drive-through. It's still not dark in Madrid.
Though certainly cooler at this point.
It is cooler at this point. The sun is down, but it's not quite dark yet. Traditionally, again, the papal welcome ceremony takes place earlier in the afternoon.
That's right.
4 o'clock. But because of the heat, all the main events have been taking place much later here in Madrid.
Some of the other themes that came out of the address, I mean, the one that caught me was the reason for our joy, which we've been talking about the joy of World Youth Day quite a bit, but that the reason for that joy, the Pope said, was that through Christ we have that we give wings to our freedom.
Yes.
And you know, certainly, at least here in Madrid, we've heard lots of comments and people who talk about freedom or claim to have an understanding of freedom. But really that we only sense the true freedom when we find it in Christ. And that was another theme that comes out again.
And again, it's a concept that a lot of people don't get. We've been sold on the idea that freedom is doing whatever you want.
Right.
Rather, the idea of freedom, which means not being in bondage.
That's right. It's the freedom to say yes to God's plan.
Absolutely. You see again the Puerta de Alcalá. The Popemobile is driving right back the way he came. And the enthusiasm has not waned.
No, in fact, I think it'll continue for the next couple of days now. This really is the moment where, at every World Youth Day that I've been to in the past, I mean, the energy level starts to become contagious among all of the people in a city. It's just the joy. It becomes too hard to ignore. And so at this point, I think people really start to become moved by the energy and the hope and the joy that all of these young people will hold on to as they are inspired by the words and the actions and the very person of Pope Benedict and our Savior, Jesus Christ.
can hear a little bit of the announcements that are being made to direct the pilgrims which way to go and which way to not go. There's been some serious crowd control at this World Youth Day, although nobody seems to be doesn't seem to be bothering very many people. Pilgrims, as usual, are very happy to go the way they're told, to stand in line, to wait, to show their badges with the volunteer or the security.
And the waiting becomes another time of celebrating, getting to know each other.
Yep. Standing by for camera. Well, and that concludes this portion of the main event, but there are still more events that are going to be taking place tonight. The youth festival that began on Tuesday, all day yesterday. There are concerts, cultural gatherings. Here at the Love and Life site, they're getting ready for a concert celebrating religious and consecrated life. There are concerts at the Retiro Park. I believe there are film screenings also taking place throughout the city. There's all kinds of activities. So the main event might be over, but
the party continues.
Absolutely, for today, and then of course tomorrow. Tomorrow, as we mentioned earlier, the main event is the Way of the Cross, and it sort of begins a type of a mini sort of World Youth Day Triduum.
That's right.
With the Way of the Cross on Friday, the vigil, as we hold vigil over Saturday, with the final, I guess, the climax of the celebration, the closing Eucharist.
And the Pope asked us. The Pope asked us to meditate on the Way of the Cross and to enter more deeply into the mysteries. And I think this whole idea that comes about with that we're only going to know our vocation. We're only going to know the true sense of who we are when we embrace the cross that we are called to embrace, and we have to enter more deeply into the suffering, and that is part of our journey that we take on.
Part of the allowing ourselves to allowing Jesus to encounter us and possess us. That concludes our coverage for tonight. We'd like to thank Sister Angela.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me join you. And then I want to say a special thank you to everyone who joined us from wherever you are, from at home, and a special hello to the Apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus and to my family.
There you go. Give a shout out. It's got to happen.
We to all our viewers that are watching on Salt and Light Television, our digital cable network in Canada, viewers watching us through the internet at wydycentral.org. Thank you for being with us. Sister, thank you very much.
Thank
Sister
you.
Angela Gertsema, she's a sister with the Congregation of the Apostles of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. This has been great. Now, just a note, tomorrow, the main event is the Way of the Cross. It's going to take place at 7. Our coverage begins at 7 p.m. That's local Madrid time. If you're watching online at wydcentral.org, wherever you are, local time 7 p.m. If you're watching in the Eastern time zone or on our digital cable network, Salt and Light Television in Canada, it's 1 p.m. Eastern, that's 10 a.m. Pacific. But don't forget that tomorrow is also the third catechesis session, and we're going to be broadcasting catechesis live here from the Love and Life site. Our catechist tomorrow is Archbishop Timothy Dolan.
Very exciting.
Yay.
Archbishop of New York. Should be very, very good. That's going to be live here, 10 a.m. Madrid time. If you're watching it again on our digital cable network, Salt and Light Television, it's going to air at 9 a.m. Eastern. That's 6 a.m. Pacific. And a note, if you're watching on Salt and Light Television right now, stay tuned because we're going to go right into a special youth festival event, a panel discussion right here from the Love and Life site. The topic is the civilization of love. So I guess that's everything for tonight. Thank you for being with us and for watching World Youth Day Central. I'm Pedro Guevara Man.
Father Chris Valka. Hasta mañana.